Welcome to Longevity.Technology. Today we're diving into the cutting edge of epigenetics and personalized health. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Ryan Smith, who's the CEO of TruDiagnostics, a true leader in the epigenetics testing space. Now, Longevity.Technology is launching FLT, our new line of supplements focused on longevity, cognition, and muscle health. We're also partnering with TruDiagnostics to bring their epigenetic test kits to our customers, and we only partner with the best in the business. Now, this partnership is all about empowering people to measure and understand their biological age and the broader impact of their lifestyle choices on their health. So let's get into it. Ryan, it's an absolute pleasure for you to join us today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Phil. I'm excited to talk about epigenetics.
Well, of course, Ryan, we could get into the long reads pretty quickly, right? So let's take it back to the top. Just for those that are new to the field, what exactly is an epigenetic test, and how does it differ from normal genetic testing?
Yeah, I think everyone's probably at this point had some experience with genetic testing before and can talk about some of the outputs you get, like ancestry or some of these risks for disease. Epigenetics is very similar, but epi sort of stands for above, so above the genome. And so what we're talking about here are changeable patterns of expression and gene expression. I oftentimes refer it to, DNA might be the hardware, but the epigenetics is sort of the software that's running your body, telling your body what to do, what to express, and what patterns or processes to turn on and off. And so with DNA methylation in particular, that's an off switch, and that's really what we specialize in measuring.
Okay, and obviously there are a lot of ways that people are looking at measuring, biological age and the effects on their health. Obviously, we've even got, video-based applications now that are looking at people's video. What makes TruDiagnostics kits and tests unique from others in the marketplace?
Yeah, I would say a few things. In the multi-omic film now, where there are many ways to measure biological age, one of the things that's the most important as you're trying to figure out what platform is right for you is looking at data. And that's one thing that we at TruDiagnostic do, I would say, pretty well. We probably have more publications on DNA methylation, and particularly these biological aging clocks, than anyone else in the space. And particularly, we're really good at creating algorithms that are very, very predictive of long-term outcomes. And really, that's what we want in a clock. We want to be able to sort of assess where we are now so we can use it to predict outcomes and hopefully make changes that improve our health.
Well, I had to say, Ryan, you were very kind back in 2022. I had one of your tests, and my wife had the test at the same time. And I was doing quite well. I was 7 years younger, and my wife actually came out 10 years older. And I have to say, it was very influential on her lifestyle choices straight after that, right? But obviously, biological age is a key marker. Now, how is that influenced by lifestyle choices versus the genetic factors that we all carry around?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the questions we're still elucidating and trying to get better and better at. But as the algorithms get better as well, we actually see that generally lifestyle has more of an impact. Even with some of the first clocks that were created, probably the most notable is some of those Steve Horvath clocks from 2013. Some of their initial heritabilities were in the 40%, meaning that 40% might be more genetic, and then less, and you have that 60% being more lifestyle, nutrition, all the things we do on a day-to-day basis. But now with some of the newer algorithms that we'll talk about a little bit more, they're actually becoming even less heritable, which we're sort of in this nature versus nurture debate, giving us the ability to impact our own health a lot more. And I think that's a huge asset because it puts control back into our hands. So long as we can get a good baseline of where we're at, we can really then start to make changes for the better. And a lot of those changes are in things we can do on a daily basis. That's the other thing about epigenetics is it's not just about medications or some of these things that are accessible only through a physician. You can make changes to your diet, your sleep schedule, your physical activity schedule, and all of these can actually be seen and change these biological aging patterns.
Yeah, and I guess that obviously a key part of that is your diet, right? So obviously we've spent a long time looking at the ingredients, partnered with some very innovative companies with human evidence behind the ingredients that we've got in our stacks. Now, obviously, we all know that supplements can really do quite a big shift on your epigenetic scores. So, how can people be tracking that perhaps through the data that they get when they start with us, and then maybe 6 or 12 months down the line? What would we expect to see?
Oh, I think it really depends on the supplement. There have been some amazing studies recently on interventional studies on things like vitamin D or nicotinamide riboside, for instance, some of these NAD precursors. And we certainly see different effects with biological age. We see that some products, one of my favorite examples is lithium. A lot of people, for instance, might know lithium as a bipolar medication, but in certain cohorts, we actually see it has a biological age improvement and with some of these epigenetic clocks. And so there are a lot of different molecules that are each going to affect you differently. But I also want to maybe talk about some of our new testing, even outside of biological age, where we can actually quantify the individual nutrient levels of things like vitamin D or alpha ketoglutarate or creatine or some of these things that have been noted as longevity specific compounds. And so now with epigenetics, we can actually quantify those even directly. And so we can actually see where you're at within these pathways. We can even see about things like nicotinamide riboside downstream metabolites to say, are you having enough nicotinamide riboside, or are you maybe having too much, and then increasing some of those downstream metabolites, which are less advantageous. So I think that right now, the one big takeaway is that epigenetics is absolutely influenced by your diet and lifestyle factors. And the outputs we can read on that are not just in the biological age category, but even quantifying those factors. And so we're going to start to learn a lot more about what are the best combinations. And it might be that everyone is personally different, right? That we might all need different levels. But with the combination of both of these outputs, we think we can really influence the way we do personalized nutrition.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're partnering, right? Because obviously we're very proud of some of our ingredients and our ingredient partners. Obviously, we're partnering with Chromadex, obviously as a NAD plus booster. And when we talked before, you mentioned that ergothioneine was coming through as a very interesting compound that you're seeing in your data.
Yeah, definitely. So ergothioneine in particular was the largest effect size of any metabolite in our multi-omic data set. So we measured almost 8,000 metabolites, and ergothioneine was still the most highly related to longevity outcomes. And so we tend to be really big fans of ergothioneine and really anything that affects the mitochondria. But I think that your list of products like nicotinamide riboside, ergothioneine, they both are mitochondrial sort of products that help with improvement. And we would expect to see some big differences in the biological age of people who use those.
Yeah, and I guess that we're on the on ramp here, right, as an industry, and of course, you guys have been up front doing a lot of your great work, becoming really a de facto standard for really consumer diagnostics. And of course, we're seeing the space evolve all the time. You guys have been right at the front line of all of this for such a long time now. Where do you see this going over the next 5 years? Do you see the clinical community integrating tighter with the work that we're doing in this kind of consumer space?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, one of the things that people don't know about TruDiagnostic is that our biggest market is actually healthcare providers who are actually using this within the clinic. And the lessons that we can learn there are incredibly valuable. And so I think that my vision is certainly a lofty one, I think, of DNA methylation, but also in aging. I think that DNA methylation might end up even overpassing traditional blood-based biomarker testing because of the large scope that you can get with an easily accessible few drops of blood with a blood spot card. We now report on over 1,700 different proteins, metabolites, and clinical values. We've shown that of those, we have a 90% accuracy within the clinical range, but the epigenetic proxies are actually more predictive of disease outcomes even than the regular biomarkers. So I think that the larger impact of DNA methylation algorithms to this space will be large-scale implementation at low cost with lots of data available. And I think specifically in the field of aging, we can use all of that data to help validate what works and what doesn't. We've published some papers with universities like Yale, where we've looked at which interventions are the best for aging. And hopefully what we'll do is we'll get an actual blueprint of the best thing to do for each of us to optimize our longevity.
And I guess the big data comes in then, right? Because obviously the more people you've got coming through, the more profiling you get. And of course, then that puts you into the position where you've got some very important data for the industry.
Absolutely, and I'll use some of those epigenetic biomarker proxies of NAD as a good example, where we actually saw that the nicotinamide riboside precursors do increase all of those downstream pathways, but NMN doesn't quite as much, and so that leads us to do things like recommendations of NR, which then can help establish better protocols, all because we have those big data sets from people who are actively engaging in these longevity interventions.
Great. Well, we made the right choice then.
Absolutely.
Great. So, Ryan, I know you guys are super busy. You're coming to join us at our conferences and speak about some of the work that you're doing. What's happening at TruDiagnostic at the moment? What can you tell us that's on the on-ramp for the next round of innovation for you?
Yeah, I think lots of things. I mean, we continue to work on becoming the best in biological age and improving those models. We're doing some really exciting grant work with massive amounts of data to keep improving that biological age. But I think that probably the thing I'm most excited about TruDiagnostic is adding also disease-specific risk predictors. So we can do things like predicting the risk of Alzheimer's, we can predict the risk of frailty-related metrics in really almost any disease and chronic disease. And so now, in addition to biological aging, in addition to testing metabolites and nutritional variables, we can also then predict your risk of developing these different disease outcomes, which are also changeable and mitigatable, right? So we can actually influence change and improve health.
That's great, and I guess the interesting question for you, Ryan, is the tipping point from the data that you've got as a diagnostic to then obviously understanding where the interventions come in. So, of course, the clinical layer, as you say, is very important. You're deployed in clinics, but in terms of the work that you're doing now with your rollout of all of this data, how is that affecting people from a kind of consumer perspective? You know, you take your test, you get your results, you sit at home, kind of going, this is a little bit challenging. Where do I go next? I guess it's ringing the clinician, right?
Yeah, certainly. You know, some of our information is complicated, and we highly recommend working with a physician to help interpret that data. But other things, like even some of those diet and nutrition things, are actually relatively easy to influence yourself. You can sort of see where you're deficient, where we might recommend supplementation or change, and then make immediate and sort of changes. And so we've seen this now. Even, you know, we've had over now 1,700 people who have tested at least 3 or more times on our platform. And we're able to see that longitudinal change, once they implement certain protocols, tends to improve or at least reduce their age acceleration. So we have people who might have started 10 years older, like your wife, who are now getting much, much younger in that biological age through I think first off, the testing to establish a baseline, and then to correct any deficiencies we might see. And that's also one point I wanted to mention as well, is that we're really the only company out there that has what we call generation explainable clocks. They don't just tell you your age, they don't just tell you if you're older or younger, but they tell you why. And that's really important to establishing the best protocols to then reverse that process.
So Ryan, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your insights on helping us better understand the power of epigenetics in shaping our health journeys. At Longevity.Technology, our mission really is to equip people with the tools and knowledge they need to optimize their health span. And this partnership with TruDiagnostics is really a significant step in that direction. So for anyone interested in exploring their biological age and taking actionable steps to improve it, keep an eye out for our TruDiagnostic kits available through the FLT brand via our website. And thanks again, Ryan, for looking into the real deep dive of what's happening with TruDiagnostics and all the great work that you guys are continuing in the field.